case you didn't know, I am a feminist. It is not an identity that is very central to me, but it is still one of my identities. Of course, nowadays it has become quite an embarrassment to be a feminist, and I had to ask myself whether I still wanted to be associated with this label that is being daily defiled by its loudest exponents. If I lived in the West, I'd probably have discarded it by now, but since I don't, my outlook is more global, and on a global scale I think feminism still has a place. While in the West women have achieved not only equality of rights but also equality of opportunity, in other places they are still fighting for equality of rights. Living in the Middle East, I follow what is happening in neighboring countries, and I see many brave women still fighting for their rights. I am worried that the turning of feminism into a dirty word will give the authoritarian forces in those countries legitimacy to silence these women. And so, when I attack Western regressive feminists, I do it not because I want to destroy feminism. I do it because I want to save it. The problem is, if we want to save feminism, we'll need to find justification for its existence in the West. Alas, the causes that today's Western feminism focuses on are demonstrably laughable. Everything I hear from today's most popular feminists is just an insult to my intelligence, and to theirs. Those are not real problems, those are not real issues. But I still think feminism can have merit even in the West, if it changes direction. My feminism comes out of my Nietzschean attitude to life. Now, that may sound funny, because Friedrich Nietzsche is well known to have been a raving misogynist.
I like him already.
Nevertheless, let's examine the philosophy behind Nietzsche's misogyny, and see if we can extract a feminist approach out of it. To understand Nietzsche's view of women, we need to talk a little bit about his view on morality. Nietzsche hypothesized that the driving force of humans, and everything else in the universe, is what he called will to power. The will to power strives to overcome, so when you manage to overcome something you feel joy, and the harder it was to overcome, the greater the joy. At the dawn of human history, said Nietzsche, the men who were more powerful used their power to assert their control over other humans, and so humanity was divided into individual rulers and a herd of their subordinates. The rulers would act on their own desires, do what felt good to them, often at the expense of the ruled. Nietzsche called this master morality, a morality that is built on expressing your own powers and doing what feels good to you. But their subordinates, after all, were also driven by will to power, and it had to express itself somehow. And so, they've created an alternative morality, a slave morality, which was based not on what made them feel good, but on negating anything that the masters defined as good. Thus, all the values espoused by the masters as virtues were redefined as vices, which meant that all of man's natural urges were condemned by slave morality. Furthermore, the slaves turned all of their weaknesses into virtues. Thus, fear to stand your ground was redefined as goodness, timid baseness was redefined as humility, cowardice was redefined as patience, and so forth. Slave morality is driven not by the desire to develop oneself and become happier, but by the resentment that the slave feels towards the master who is more powerful. It gave the slaves an imaginary victory over the masters, in that it made them feel that they are better than them, and thus it satisfied their will to power. But then, the slaves found a way to take over in reality as well, with the advent of Christianity, which promised eternal heaven to those who adopted slave morality. Thus, Western culture became a domain of mediocrity, established on negation of man's inner powers, and resentment towards anyone who was greater than others. If anyone showed signs of greatness, they were demanded to lower themselves to the level of the herd. Slave morality is based not on doing what makes you or others feel good, but on not doing what makes the others feel bad. Even the slightest offense to others must be avoided, and if that means that we have to castrate humanity and prevent it from achieving any kind of greatness, then so be it. The Enlightenment rebelled against the Christian world, and wanted to liberate man to live by his rationality and not by obeying religious texts. But, says Nietzsche at the end of the 19th century, the Enlightenment was bound to fail in its project to free man, because it did not rebel against slave morality. Even the moral systems created by the atheist philosophers of the 19th century were still based on repressing humanity's inner powers, on reducing everyone to the level of the mediocre collective. Slave morality has completely overtaken the human mind, and even the best thinkers couldn't overcome it. But, said Nietzsche, we do have something that can guide us and show us the way to rebel against it, and that is our body. Slave morality is only a few thousand years old, whereas human biology evolved over millions of years. If something feels good to us, if it fills our body with a happy feeling, then it is good for us. even if contemporary thought tells us otherwise. By following the direction of our body, and establishing values based on what feels good, we can re-establish a master morality. Now, going back to master morality doesn't mean that we go back to having slaves. Remember that the will to power feels the most joy when it overcomes something, and a slave is someone who has already been overcome, so there's not much joy in mastering them. The Nietzschean man wants to live in a free society, with free individuals that can pose themselves as his spiritual rivals, and challenge him to employ all of his powers to compete. Therefore, to establish a new master morality, we need to find a way to harmonize between our inner powers and the wish to allow freedom to all humans. Nietzsche's philosophical endeavor, what he called gay science, was to release the inner powers that slave morality represses and defines as negative, and use rationality to create a worldview that turns them into positive values. Slave morality claims that individualism is bad and we should bow before the will of the collective, yet we feel that we want to express our individuality, so we shall create a way of life that expresses it in a manner that benefits a free society. Slave morality claims that our desires are bad because they hurt others, yet we feel that satisfying our desires makes us feel good, so we shall create a way of life that satisfies them in a way that pleasures other people. Slave morality claims that earthly life is meaningless and we should dedicate it to reaching heaven in the afterlife, yet we feel that we want to live, so we shall construct our earthly life in a way that will turn it into a joyful thing, and so forth. And when it comes to things that make you feel bad, the Nietzschean man does not try to eliminate them like slave morality does, but rather welcomes them as challenges to be overcome. They are overcome by creating a worldview that rationalizes them as something good and necessary, and thus enjoyable. In this way, you become stronger, able to deal with anything that comes your way, and as a result you are happier. But what does that have to do with women? Well, Nietzsche lived at a time when women started to get involved in the public sphere, in domains that previously were exclusive to men. Nietzsche didn't like this development, for two main reasons. First, he believed that men and women have a different nature, and that this process forces women to forgo their nature and try to act like men. Secondly, he claimed that culture has taught women to be slaves, and so today they are even bigger proponents of slave morality than men are. So allowing women into the public sphere at this point in time has a detrimental effect on the fight to overcome slave morality. This is how he saw it back then, in the 1880s. Let's try to think how he would have seen things today. On the one hand, today's feminists seem to be the embodiment of everything that Nietzsche warned against. They took the values of liberalism and reinterpreted them as slave morality, demanding that we all repress our inner forces to prevent even the slightest discomfort to others. They are not driven by the will to better themselves, or to make women happier, but by resentment towards the other, in this case towards men. On the other hand, this feminism doesn't really represent the woman of today. In the last century, Western culture has gone some distance in the way that Nietzsche pointed to, and there are many people who have discarded slave mentality, including women. Today there are plenty of strong women out there, women who are driven by their own inner forces, women which Nietzsche would have surely admired. It is no longer possible for anyone to claim that women are all agents of slave morality. It is also obvious by now that the differences between men and women aren't as absolute as Nietzsche, like most scholars of his time, perceived them. The differences between the genders are statistical. Men tend to be more in a certain way, tend to have certain traits which we call masculine, and women tend to have traits that we call feminine. And this is why I believe Western feminism still has things to do. I believe that our culture still doesn't give enough respect to the feminine, that feminine ways of expression are not regarded as highly as masculine ones. Transforming our worldview in a way that will hold feminine ways of expression in higher regard can open up more career and life options for women, more ways to express themselves and be happy. So this is what I'm trying to do as a culture critic. I try to make us think differently about the feminine, give it more value. As we are now on YouTube, let me show you what I mean by taking some YouTube women as an example. The first woman we are going to talk about needs no introduction. Phan is one of the creators who have turned YouTube into the cultural powerhouse that it is today. Michelle was one of the first girls who started, back in the early days of YouTube, to make videos in which she gave fashion tips and showed how she applies her own makeup. This was a new form of entertainment, something that no one had done until then, and no one could have predicted it would have any audience. Who wants to watch girls apply makeup? Well, as it turns out, lots of people. A decade later, Michelle is a fashion empire, with her own line of cosmetics and one of the most successful YouTube channels. She opened up the way for many other girls to make a career out of makeup videos. And still, makeup doesn't really get much respect. Most people regard it merely as something that girls do to attract boys, and many women complain of all the hard work that they have to put into something that is meant to please men. But is that really all there is to it? I don't watch makeup videos, but I did get to see some of them over the years. When I watched Michelle's videos, I was immediately struck by her professionalism and her perfectionism. Everything in her videos, the scenery, the editing, the camera work, the use of music, and of course the makeup, is immaculately done. So when I thought which women I want to feature in this video, she immediately came into my mind, because I knew that if I looked into it, I would find that she regards makeup as much more than just something to put on to appeal to boys. It didn't take me long to find what I was looking for. In a Draw My Life video, Michelle says this about her childhood.
Because we moved so often, I ended up going to several different schools in 1 year. So it was hard for me to make friends because not only was I shy, but I was always the new girl. Luckily, I had an imagination, and I drew a lot. Disney princesses were one of my favorite things to draw. I wanted to be just like them.
She goes on to describe a childhood that was pretty difficult, which she battled through developing her imagination on her creative side.
I found something else that made me smile. It was drawing. I draw superheroes all day in class. I even created a superhero version of myself. I seriously thought that when I grew up, I would have superpowers.
And when she grew up,
my college gave out laptops to all the students. I always dreamt of having my own laptop, but I never thought I'd have one. Well, guess what? This was the laptop where I filmed my very first makeup tutorial. I just wanted to show every girl out there how beautiful she was, and how makeup can be their own superhero costume. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, without their costumes, they're still powerful, but it's their costume that tells the world that they're superheroes.
Michelle Phan is an artist. Her face is her canvas, and makeup is her medium. And the same is true for a lot of women. Makeup is a way for them to express their creativity, and to bring beauty into our world. It's not just about appealing to others, it is also about expressing your own talents and feeling good about yourself. Makeup artists like Michelle are teaching women how to express themselves in that way, giving them the tools to do the art. It is time that as a society we've come to see it as an art, and give makeup artists the respect that they deserve. Besides being a makeup artist, Michelle is also a video artist. Yes, many women watch her videos because they want to learn tips about makeup, but her videos are interesting to watch even if you don't want to learn. Just like watching Bob Ross do his paintings, it is interesting to see the process of how Michelle is doing it, how she transforms herself from a cute girl into a breathtaking vision of divine beauty. It could be argued that the internet video is the most important artistic medium of our time, and Michelle Phan is one of the people that developed it. Speaking of Bob Ross, he was famous not just for his paintings but also for his soothing voice. And speaking of soothing voices...
Good evening, everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about femininity and women. I will not use many sounds in this video. It's going to be mostly just my voice. Hope you will find it relaxing as well as informative.
I'm sure that some of you need no introduction to this magnificent woman. Now, she is a YouTuber that I am quite familiar with. In fact, I can honestly say that I have gone to bed with her many times. This is of course Maria, Gentle Whispering, the undisputed queen of ASMR. I personally don't experience ASMR, which is a euphoric sensation of tingles that is triggered by certain sounds, but I do find ASMR videos to be a fun thing to fall asleep to. Because I'm not really into ASMR, I watch only a few ASMR artists, those that offer something more than just sounds. Maria is one of them, and one of the many things I like about her is that she's very proud of her femininity. I'm going to let her tell you about it herself. Go on, Masha. Work your magic.
So, there are no defined characteristics of femininity. However, there are some universal patterns that exist and that describe femininity to the fullest, and those essential traits as gentleness, empathy, sensitivity, caring, nurturance, tolerance, compassion, caring, defense, softness. However, for me, femininity is always something to do with softness and confidence. That is something that you can develop throughout your life by adopting certain habits and changing maybe your presence about yourself. I'm going to put my hair up.
As we can hear, Maria regards femininity as an asset, a spiritual power that can be developed and perfected, and I believe that her insistence on developing it also helped her become the successful YouTuber that she is. ASMR is a predominantly female medium, because women's softer voices help them be better at it than men. Maria is better at it than anyone else, and I think that it has to do with this attitude that she has. When you watch her videos, you kind of feel like you're being smothered by femininity, and for me, at least, it helps me give in to the experience and let her lull me to sleep. ASMR is a sensation that apparently a significant chunk of the population experiences, and yet it was defined only recently. It's hard to see it becoming a thing if it wasn't for YouTube, which is the perfect medium for the ASMR artists. The internet video is the most intimate artistic medium, with the viewer is usually alone watching the face of the artist that is just a few inches away. The ASMR artists use this intimacy to the fullest, getting as close as they can to the camera and trying to make you feel like the camera is actually you. The creative ones find ways to embed the sounds in some sort of situation, a roleplay that you are part of. The result is an experience that a lot of people find to be nothing less than sublime. The ASMR creators call themselves artists, and I definitely agree that the ASMR video is an art form. But as a culture critic, the question that interests me is, can we call ASMR itself an art form? The question is whether it is just produced by sounds, or is there more to it? In other words, is the whole role-playing thing just a way to make more interesting videos, or does it actually serve to enhance the pleasure of ASMR? Another question, does the order of the sounds matter? Does it make a difference if you put one certain sound after the other? If so, then you can actually create ASMR symphonies and ASMR stories. If any of you experience ASMR, I'll be glad to get some answers in the comments. Maria is definitely an artist. She puts a lot of effort and thought into her videos, and when she does a roleplay she obviously does some research and preparation to make it credible and interesting. In this video about femininity, she speaks a little bit about the different perceptions of femininity in different cultures, but ends up reminding us that in the end it all boils down to a few simple things.
So it always differs from culture to culture, but in the end, it's all about a woman being kind and sweet and nurturing. Just have that little smile on the face. Being more gentle and more understanding to men simply makes you more attractive to a male species. So it's about finding your best features, about the way you treat yourself and things around you and people around you. If you're kind and sweet, if you are gentle with things around you, if you choose to have more flowing way about you, if you choose to use your body language not in a seductive, any trashy way, no, in a more confident but soft way that will attract more people. Obviously, it has to be flowing. It cannot be pressured or fake. But femininity is something that you can adapt over time.
Once again, we hear her talk about femininity as inner powers that can be developed. But I want to focus on something else she says here. Before, when we talked about makeup, I mentioned that people are denigrating it because they see it as nothing more than an attempt to appeal to men. But why is that bad? The only reason it has a bad reputation is because of feminism. That sort of feminism that is not about empowering women but about hating men. Many feminists today hate men to such an extent that they don't even like to be looked at and desired, and talk of the male gaze as something negative. Imagine being so full of resentment and hate that you can't even enjoy being sexually desired. Maria isn't twisted like that, and she knows that being desired is a good thing, and that most women want it. According to Nietzsche, when you develop your inner powers and form your way of life around them, you become stronger and richer in spirit. When your spirit is so rich, it overflows with joy, and you feel compelled to give some of it to others. Thus, you are being good to others, not because you obey the moral law, but because your nature has become good, because you want to share your happiness around. I would add that it also makes you more attractive, making your inner beauty shine through. Maria is definitely a good example of that. Over the years, I've watched her become increasingly more beautiful and glamorous, just blossoming as a woman. It is actually important for an ASMR artist to be attractive, because they are literally in your face for at least 20 minutes, and it's a better experience when the vision is appealing. So again, Maria's attitude to life helped her become a better artist as well. I wonder though, did she get any outside help in becoming so lovely?
I follow a bunch of makeup artists.
I thought so. But that's another thing about makeup. Unlike painters, you are not starting with an empty canvas. Makeup is there to accentuate your beauty. And if you have inner beauty, it is a way to externalize it. To be a makeup artist, then, also requires you to work on yourself, to develop your inner beauty. Speaking of makeup and amazing, beautiful women...
Hi, my name is Katie.
That's right, we are going to talk about Katie. Katie fucking Wayne, the girl who showed us that sometimes what you need is too much makeup. If you are not familiar with Katie's incredible story, let's just say that she was this normal 15-year-old California girl who was a member of Gaia Online, a site where you roleplay as an anime character. Then, one day in early 2008, she decided to upload a couple of YouTube videos aimed at her Gaia friends, in which she acted out her anime identity. So she splashed her face with loads of eyeliner, played the fool in front of the camera, and this happened.
Okay, hi. Okay. My name is Boxy. Most of you know me as, most of you know me as Boxy, I suppose. If you're watching this, you probably know me as Boxy. But, a lot of people don't know me as Moldy Lunchbox. And, so, yeah, that's my Gaia username on Gaia Online. And I told my Gaia Online friend, buddy, one second, I'm uncomfortable. I told my Gaia Online buddy friend, Admiral Awesome, that I would make a video just for him. So I'm doing it. Here it is. Addy, I love you.
This was just meant to entertain her friends, but a year later, someone found this video and made it public, aiming to make fun of this crazy girl. What followed was a weird, terrifying, and ultimately uplifting chain of events, which constitutes what is arguably the greatest story in the short history of internet culture. The story is too long to be told here, but I've done something better. I've decided that I too want to invent a new art form, so I've invented something that I called playlist art. I've created a playlist that tells a Boxy story, and I will link to it below. Just turn your adblock on, click play all, put it on full screen, and watch it as if it was a movie. You might find it silly at first, but by the 15th video it becomes riveting. featuring the first internet war, 4chan's craziest hour, Anonymous being very, very naughty, one of the worst and most notorious cases of cyberbullying, some imaginative and top-quality trolling, the first community to form around a YouTube personality, the birth of a new hope, loads of great original music, lots of good comedy, cameo appearances by some of your favorite YouTubers, and a story of love triumphing over hate, and all of that inspired by this stupid face. And as a culture critic, I have to ask, what is it about this girl? What is it about her that generates so much venom, so much creativity, so much devotion, and so much love? And I think that the answer to this question is tied to another question I'm asking. What is the art of internet video? A few minutes ago, I claimed that it is the most important artistic medium of our time, but what is it that makes it unique in comparison to, say, the art of television? This question is connected to Katie because I consider the Boxy videos to be the purest expression of this art form. Most people who watch the first 4 Boxy videos have no idea what she's talking about, and yet they will go back and watch them again and again. She isn't telling jokes, she isn't singing, she doesn't even make any sense. So why do they watch it? They watch it because they enjoy watching her speak, and when people are enjoying something because of the way it is done, we can call it aesthetics, we can call it art. But why do they enjoy it so much? Well, first of all, we should say that Katie has some conventional talents. She is a natural comedienne, she has a flair for the theatrical, and a very creative mind. But that's not what makes her so special. A YouTube video, I think, is first and foremost the art of personality. Because the creators are so close to the camera, the personality shines through, more than in any other art form. Katie has a great personality, but more than that, she has a very intense way of projecting that personality. That's what makes her so annoying and off-putting at first, but if you can get past the initial irritation, well, all I can say is that just watching her talk makes me feel giddy. As for what makes her personality so great, that is something that is much harder to define. But one thing we can say for sure is that it is a very positive personality. She just exudes positivity and happiness, and it is very infectious. With this positivity, Katie Wayne managed to overcome all the bad shit that the internet threw her way. That makes her a true Nietzschean hero. And if you watch the Draw My Life videos made by Phan and Gentle Whispering, you will see that they too went through some bad experiences. The kind of experiences that build character and make you stronger. The great thing about all 3 of them is that they didn't let this toughness come at the expense of their femininity, but found a way to blend it into it. Once we start taking the art of internet video more seriously, we will probably talk about how developing a magnetic personality can be a form of art. Michelle, Maria, and Katie are examples of how this can be done with feminine personalities, and how you can employ your femininity to become successful. Now, to be clear, I am not calling these 3 women feminists. As far as I am aware, none of them identifies herself as such. I believe that the goal of feminism should be to make itself redundant, and if we see women being strong and doing their thing, we should treat it as something natural and not slap the label of feminism on it. What I am calling feminism is what I just did. Meaning, taking things that women are doing and giving them a higher value than they usually get. The feminine side of humanity doesn't get the respect it deserves, and this is what I'm trying to change. This is my feminism. I am assuming that most of my viewers are anti-feminist. What I'm asking of you is to make a distinction between positive and negative feminism. Oppose those feminists who are driven by negativity and resentment, not those feminists who are driven by positivity and the wish to allow women to develop and achieve the full potential. Supporting the latter is the way to achieve the society that we want, a society where we are all occupied in the pursuit of happiness, not in envying what the other has. A society built on mutual empathy and respect, not on resentment. A society where everyone thinks like a master, not like a servant. Thus spake Zarathustra's serpent.